Okay, so I just got back from Elemental and I'm left more confused than with a Christopher Nolan plot. Because I am absolutely bewildered that I actually enjoyed this movie. I remember everyone was dogging on this film after just the teaser, and while I wasn't jumping out of my seat, I was cautiously optimistic. I mean, Pixar is responsible for hours and hours of laughs and smiles and tears and just straight up bangers. Of course I want to see them succeed, man. But damn, dude, whoever they hired to edit these trailers went out of their way to make Elemental seem like the Wonder Bread of animated films. And it frickin' worked. There's a decent chance the only thing you associate with the title Elemental is, I like the word moist, okay? It's who I am! Which was a fan animation. That's just how darn poorly this film was marketed. It's embarrassing. The fact that Elemental was gonna be directed by the same guy behind The Good Dinosaur didn't exactly help my enthusiasm either. I've only ever seen the film once, but you could not pay me to sit through that insomnia cure again. So I don't really have a clue what compelled me to go see Elemental. I was honestly more excited about the Carl's Date short before the main event, but I was there in the theater on opening day and I'm glad I was. Sure, it's no Toy Story 2, but Elemental brings back the charm, creativity, humor, and maturity that I love this studio for. To back up this pretty ballsy claim, I will be going into spoilers for the whole movie, so consider yourself warned. If you're a Pixar fan in any capacity, I highly recommend you give it a watch. But for my Ultra Chads out there who've already seen it, I invite you to strap in for the rest of the video. Now, what better place to start with an animated film than with the animation itself? Pixar films have always looked great. Since the 90s, time and time again, they've made monumental achievements in the medium. In the past 5 years or so, however, thanks to a small indie film you may have heard of, Into the Spider-Verse, the standard's been raised when it comes to crafting stylistic art styles with distinct character. Studios like DreamWorks have been having a blast creatively stretching themselves, whereas every Disney movie visually looks like it's part of one continuous movie. Now, I'm not gonna stand here and pretend like Pixar's blowing my socks clean off my feet like Sony has been recently, but Elemental still remains an impressive and respectable landmark in animation. Apparently this thing was in the oven for 7 years because the sheer computing power it took to render characters made entirely out of particles rather than actual models was just unheard of. It was the most difficult Pixar film to animate yet, and I personally think the ambition paid off. Especially when we had Lightyear right before this, a film that barely warranted being animated in the first place because it just strives for realism anyway. It was so refreshing to have a cast of characters oozing with so much personality and identity from just a first glance. And Pixar takes full advantage of their unique designs for some super entertaining visual gags. I loved whenever Ember would just chow down on some shards in glass to melt and reshape it to her liking. Then there's this cute bit where she and Wade use a photo booth, but her flames make the photo overexposed as all heck. Wade is full on bawling for like half the runtime and it's always funny. Plus the animators get super creative with his literal transparency.
Right, I am not an inspector.
He's pretty awesome. But what I find even more admirable is how the animation actively enhances the storytelling. It goes without saying that Wade is a pretty spontaneous fella. When you put him into a teapot, he becomes the teapot, both figuratively and literally. Bruce would be proud. His literal molecular buildup marries so nicely to his personal conflict of feeling like a drifting soul, going with the flow and struggling to find a true intentional direction to take his life. It's no grand revelation to recognize Ember is the contrary. She's had her life carved out for her and buckles under the pressure of trying to fulfill her parents' wishes. With such immense responsibility comes moments of both outrage and devastation, both of which are immaculately depicted on the screen. When Ember reached her limit, her flames grow this terrifying purple, cementing the stakes of her failures. This is contrasted with quiet moments of somber in which her flames dwindle into a shadow of their former selves, conveying just how small she feels. I remember watching this scene on the beach going, yes dude, this is what animation is for. The absolute most memorable moments of the film were thanks to the great visual imagery, which is taken to the next level as the animators slowly start merging these two worlds for the most wholesome aspect aspect of the motion picture. A Romeo and Juliet love story is obviously by no means an untapped market, but thanks to some great execution, pacing, as well as brilliant motifs and symbolism that made my artsy-fartsy brain do cartwheels, Wade and Ember's dynamic proves itself to be worthy of the spotlight. I think the root of what makes a good romance is mutual beneficiality, aka if and how the relationship in question facilitates character development. Character dynamics in general are brilliant tools for organic character growth as they allow for grounded arcs that stem from a tangible source rather than just thin air. And not that thin air. The romance genre in general has the opportunity for this increased character verisimilitude when it comes to development because more often than not, we as people are inspired by each other. It's how we grow as a species. So by having the focus of your piece of fiction be a relationship, you as the writer are giving yourself the best shot possible at conveying that notion. Now, a character's arc should never be arbitrarily chosen. It's not just a checkbox to make your protagonist feel more human. Good films are intentional about how their characters grow and use that maturation to communicate thematically with the audience. Elemental does this and takes it a step further, managing to strengthen its core dynamic in the process. You see, Wade and Ember's arcs act as two halves to one fleshed out moral. Each realization is solid on its own, but the two lessons marry together so nicely for one big ultra message. For example, since the loss of his father, Wade has fallen victim to complacency. He's been floating through life without much of an end goal in mind, living every day regretting not having made amends with his late dad. But Ember teaches him to learn from that mistake and take the reins while he still can. In the film's words,
it means embrace the light while it burns, because it won't always last forever.
Now let's add Ember's dilemma into the equation. On the opposite side of the spectrum, she feels her future's already been set in stone. Every waking moment of hers is spent either working at the shop or worrying about having to take over. It's Wade that gets her to see what her temper's telling her and helps her pursue a talent she clearly enjoys. So put these together and you have the wonderful moral of not hesitating to prioritize your own happiness, as those opportunities for a better life won't last forever. And the journey to get to this realization is just as great. Obviously, as a rom-com, this movie's littered with adorable moments that just made my heart melt. Whether it's them dancing, taking photos, enjoying the view, it's just wholesome through and through. But what really impressed me about this dynamic is the genuinely memorable symbolism that's present here. One of my favorite examples comes from that scene on the beach again. For the first time, Ember considers the possibility of what Wade had suggested, that maybe her bursts of outrage aren't this curse, but something she should listen to. This epiphany is brilliantly paired with a shot of the sun touching the horizon, illustrating the worlds of water and fire colliding to create something truly beautiful. What's even better is that this is immediately followed up with the introduction of a super cool motif. I know I'm like the only person in the world that cares about this, but too bad, it's my video. So Ember creates this little ball depicting a Vivisteria flower inside. With this being the first time Wade witnesses her creative talents, this sphere serves as a symbol of a life for Ember outside of the shop, pursuing something she loves. Now the motif aspect comes in when they start exchanging this thing, and whether or not Ember's in possession of it is relative to how feasible she views her dream as in that moment. Right after their little beach date, she's over the moon. We see her face literally light up as she looks at this thing in adoration. However, she's quickly reminded of her father's condition and responsibility to take over so he can finally take his long overdue retirement. So the next day, she returns it to Wade, as now she reckons leaving her dream behind is for the best. Then during the second act low point, Wade returns it, as despite being heartbroken, he still wants the best for her. It's just a super clever way to subtly track where they are in their arcs and relationship, and I'm a sucker for that sort of thing. My absolute favorite scene though is every concept I just discussed, but executed at level 11. Their first touch is done so well. I could watch this moment over and over. When a film is actively creating 24 paintings a second, you know you've got something special in your hands. Hats off to the animation team for like the 1000th time, because this visual of their literal steaming contact as Ember's hand cools while Wade's comes to a boil to find a middle ground is just seared into my mind. There is no dialogue, but with just this imagery and their smiles alone, it speaks volumes. The action itself is far from spontaneous, but I think it's that subtle hesitancy that makes this scene for me. The steam between the two perfectly illustrates how, despite the obstacles, they still find comfort in each other at the end of the day. They say nothing worthwhile comes easy, and that's the notion I get from this scene. They both know it will take some effort to make this work, but they're willing to pay whatever price it takes. It's just beautiful, man. Speaking of beautiful, let's talk about the conclusion, which had me acting like Wade. Yeah, there is a bit of a fake out death, but tell me it wasn't worth it for this incredible evaporation visual. Plus, it allows for this adorable moment after where, to retrieve Wade from the chimney, Ember references the crying game they played earlier. The combination of it just being a super cute callback, some great delivery by Leia Lewis, Steal the Show being used as a leitmotif, and then the parents building off everything. Dude, there's nothing stopping the happy tears. Everyone in my theater was popping off so hard. It was awesome.
Happy feet, combo combo. That ain't Falco. That ain't Falco.
All in all, Elemental's romance is adorable as hell, with loads of well-executed motifs and symbolism to separate itself from the masses. But if I'm being perfectly honest with you, this isn't even the main thing I love the film for. In fact, I adore this film for something you probably didn't even know it highlighted if you haven't seen it yourself. The true emotional core of Elemental's story surrounds Ember and her parents' struggles that come with being an immigrant family. It is so perplexing to me as to why this aspect of the film was not made more prominent in the trailers, because I was not expecting the cool Math Games film adaptation to punch me in the face with such an emotional refugee tale that hit surprisingly close to home. The first scene of Elemental establishes that Ember's parents are the first generation of their people to move to Element City as their home in Fireland was destroyed. It's made evident that the city wasn't really made for fire people in mind, but despite that, Ember's father perseveres and sets up a shop to provide for his family. From day one, Ember helps out best she can, however she can, and we see just how much pride her father has in her. Time and time again, he expresses his desire for Ember to take over when she's ready, and having infinite gratitude for all he's done for their family, Ember feels that fulfilling his wish is the least she can do. But with each passing year, her father grows weary with age. He's slower, weaker, and the long days are becoming more and more of a toll on his physical health. For the majority of the film, the poor guy's practically on his deathbed. Amber feels entirely guilty for his condition because if only she were ready to run the shop, he could finally retire. This is of course the main conflict in the film. The pressure drives Ember up the walls as this contrition festers in her heart and literally combusts continuously. Things only escalate when the shop itself gets put in jeopardy thanks to Ember's rage. As soon as we meet Wade, the writers promptly establish just how high the stakes of the shop getting shut down are. We already know the fire people are a minority, but the film does not shy away when it comes to displaying the adversity that comes with being a marginalized demographic. Ember's father has devoted his life to working day in and day out, tooth and nail, to provide for his family. So when we witness the discrimination Ember faces, it just solidifies the danger of her father's life work being on the line. At one point, they literally get told to go back to Fireland. Then at the Windbreakers game, it's heavily implied that she gets straight up slurred. Then, during dinner at Wade's place, she's told by his uncle that she has surprisingly good English.
I just have to say that you speak so well and clear.
Yeah, it's amazing what talking in the same language your entire life can do.
Not cool, man. Pixar really doesn't sugarcoat it at all, and it makes this world feel that much more brutally believable. And I'm fully aware that the racial allegory ain't perfect. Obviously, there's a big difference between skin tone and a molecular hazard, but I don't think that flaw detracts too much from the other messages this film is prioritizing. I mean, Zootopia is the exact same case, and that movie is praised to the high heavens. In the animal kingdom, prey being oppressed by predator is just essential to the circle of life. It's not something that can just stop doing. It's biologically required for the survival of every species. But despite that, Zootopia still uses that imperfect allegory to communicate a theme that goes beyond the fact of racism is bad. Elemental is very similar in that the unfortunate conditions of its world are utilized to better communicate the true thematic focus of familial love. Director Peter Sohn has been a part of Pixar since the OG days, but has said that Elemental was easily the most personal project he's ever worked on. That's most likely because it's the story of his parents. I quote, "My parents emigrated from Korea in the early 1970s and built a bustling grocery store in the Bronx. We were among many families who ventured to a new new land with hopes and dreams, all of us mixing into one big salad bowl of cultures, languages, and beautiful little neighborhoods. That's what led me to Elemental. This film was made from a genuine place of love, and I think it's that authenticity that gives it that magical Pixar touch that I can never quite put my finger on. Amber's journey is this wonderful reminder of not only how much our loved ones have done for us, but how much we should appreciate them. With parents in particular, it's easy to forget that they've lived a full life before us, filled with countless experiences that have molded them into the incredible people they are with the core values they've raised you with. It's crucial that we remind ourselves of every sacrifice they've made along the way for us, and the sheer selflessness it took them to give us the best lives they could possibly provide. It's evident that that is the heart and soul of Elemental. I quote again, "It is a very sincere film. I never thought I would be connected to something so personal. It's about thanking our parents. I got lost in making this, and every time I did, I'd go back to the North Star of appreciation for them." That statement fully bleeds through into the conclusion of this film. Ember is in shambles, and she finally admits that she does not want to run the shop. Guilt has broken her down to pieces. She feels ashamed for being such a selfish daughter, and it's her first moment of genuine catharsis. But what her dad responds with is really what gets the waterworks going.
Ember, the shop was never the dream. You were the dream. You were always the dream.
That line is the very essence of Elemental. It's hard to wrap your head around how much your parents or whoever the closest people in your life are love you. They are willing to put every drop of blood, sweat, and tears into creating a happier life for you without a single thought of what it will take on their end. I know it will never be possible to repay my parents for all the love they put into raising me, but that doesn't mean I shouldn't try. Honoring their sacrifices and giving them as much reverence as I possibly can is the absolute least I can do. The final scene of Elemental reflects that goal impeccably. Right before boarding the boat for her new internship, Ember stops and takes the time to honor her father with what they call the big bow, the highest form of respect in their culture. It always tugs at my heartstrings seeing her father's reaction of both shock and pride. We know that he once gave the same bow to his father, but when it wasn't reciprocated, it left him devastated. Seeing him finally have a relationship of mutual respect with his own daughter is so gratifying for the audience, especially when that's all wrapped up with one big emotion as they right that wrong together. Notice how neither the first nor last scene of Elemental has any focus on the romance plot, but rather the love within an immigrant family. Like any good film, Elemental is thematically nuanced. Just like Wade and Ember's arcs merged together earlier, the same is done again with the conclusion of both plot lines. Ember's relationship with her father cements the adoration and appreciation she has for him. The last thing she wants to do is take him for granted, but that doesn't mean she has to trap herself in the box that is the shop. You can still honor your roots while being your own person, and the best parents will support that. They just want to see you grow your wings and take on the world as you. Just make sure you never forget who got you there. I know Elemental wasn't received nearly as positively as this video is making it out to be, but I hope I could at least provide a fleshed out perspective of someone who genuinely did love it. This movie is not perfect, I acknowledge that, but it's made with so much heart and has so much to say that's worth listening to. Is it a step down from peak Pixar? Yes, but a step down from their golden age is a step down on the stairway to heaven. Anyway, here's a massive thank you to everyone that watched until the end. You guys are seriously the coolest people in the world. And as always, I hope you have a fantastic day.